Aisha Monroe, a distinguished U.S. Army colonel, was driving alone on the scorching stretch of Highway 95, miles away from the bustling lights of Las Vegas. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly before her, the sun beating down relentlessly as she made her way home after a military conference in Reno. At 40 years old, Aisha had earned her rank through sheer dedication, discipline, and resilience, attributes she carried not only in her military career but in every aspect of her life. As the wheels of her silver SUV hummed steadily on the cracked asphalt, she was in her own world, a place of quiet reflection after a long day. Her crisp olive green uniform, even in the heat, remained immaculate, a testament to her sharp professionalism. But as the distant shimmer of heat on the horizon played tricks on her eyes, a flicker in the rearview mirror snapped her back to reality. A patrol car was trailing closely behind her, its headlights off but its presence undeniable. Aisha's instinct kicked in. This wasn't the first time she had been pulled over by law enforcement. The officer who stepped out of the patrol car, Officer Brett Callahan, wasn't just any cop. His body language, the way he approached her SUV, already spoke volumes. His skin reddened by the Nevada sun, and his wrinkled uniform made it clear he wasn't here for a simple traffic stop. As he approached, Aisha's mind raced. She knew this moment was different. The officer's eyes, cold and judgmental, scanned her. Her military rank, her uniform, her very identity. But Aisha Monroe wasn't just another driver on the road. She was a woman who had faced adversity head-on, and this encounter would test her strength in ways she could never have anticipated. What would happen when this seemingly routine stop turned into a battle for respect, dignity, and justice? The stage was set for a clash that would alter her life forever. Aisha Monroe sat stiffly in her silver SUV, her hands gripping the steering wheel with military precision. She had seen it all before, the impatient officers, the glances that lingered a little too long, the whispers of judgment that seemed to float in the air. But this was different. This officer, Callahan, wasn't just performing a routine traffic stop. He was projecting something far more sinister, an undercurrent of hatred masked by his smug expression. As the officer's boots kicked up the dust from the roadside, Aisha instinctively adjusted her posture. Shoulders squared, hands at 10 and 2, her every movement measured. The sun beat down on the Nevada desert, but a cold chill swept through her. She had faced countless challenges in her career, but this encounter felt more like a battlefield than a simple traffic stop. Officer Brett Callahan approached the driver's side with a slow, deliberate stride, his eyes narrowing as they scanned her uniform. His presence was immediate, suffocating, like a shadow creeping in, demanding her attention. He stopped just short of the window, his boots grinding the gravel beneath him, before tapping the glass with his knuckles. Aisha lowered the window, meeting his gaze with an unblinking stare. "Good afternoon, officer," she said, her voice steady, but her mind racing, calculating each second. "How can I assist you?" Callahan didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned in, his face so close she could smell the stale coffee on his breath. The warmth of his body radiated through the small crack in the window, his eyes sweeping over her like she was an object to be appraised, dehumanized. Aisha felt her stomach tighten, but she refused to flinch. "You're speeding," he said, his voice clipped, almost too casual. "I clocked you at 10 miles over the limit." "Where are you in such a hurry, Colonel?" Aisha's breath caught for a moment, a flicker of disbelief flashing across her face. She hadn't been speeding. She knew that for sure. But she didn't challenge him, not yet. Instead, she kept her composure, presenting him with her civilian license and the vehicle registration, her military ID tucked safely out of sight. She handed them over with her palms up, signaling that she meant no harm. But Callahan wasn't interested in her papers. His eyes lingered on her name, Aisha Monroe, and the sneer that curled his lips sent a jolt of unease through her. "You're from California, huh?" he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. His tone dripped with contempt. "You people always think you own the damn road out here." The words hit Aisha like a slap. The venom in his voice was palpable, heavy with the weight of racial bias. She could feel the sting of his insult settle deep in her chest. But she didn't react, she wouldn't. Years of training had taught her the importance of restraint in moments like this. She took a slow breath and replied, her voice steady, but with a hint of authority that couldn't be ignored. "Officer, may I ask why you pulled me over?" Callahan's eyes flashed, his irritation growing. His gaze flicked to her uniform again, the silver oak leaves on her collar gleaming in the harsh sunlight. For a brief second, his expression faltered, as if he was processing something. But then the sneer returned, sharper than before. "What's a gal like you doing dressed up like that? Halloween come early?" He mocked, his words laced with disdain. The ridicule in his voice was unmistakable, and Aisha felt her blood boil. It wasn't just the words. It was the look on his face, the way he dismissed her not as a person, but as something beneath him, something to be scorned. Aisha's jaw tightened, but she refused to let the anger cloud her judgment. She was no rookie. She had been through far worse than this. But she couldn't deny the rising heat in her chest, the pressure building inside her. She had always been prepared to fight in the field, but this was different. This wasn't just a battle for respect. This was a battle for her very dignity. "I'm a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army," Aisha said, her voice firm, cutting through the tension like a blade. "I'm returning from a conference in Reno. I didn't realize I was over the speed limit. Must have missed a sign." Callahan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he just stood there, glaring at her with cold, calculating eyes. His hand rested near his gun, the weight of the situation not lost on Aisha. He was toying with her now, playing a game of power, and she could see the dangerous glint in his eyes. His next words sent a shiver down her spine. "Yeah, I bet you didn't realize," he said, his voice low, dripping with mockery. "But out here I make the rules. And you?" He paused, leaning in close enough for her to feel his breath on her skin. "You're just another person I get to put in line." Aisha felt a cold wave wash over her. She had been in combat zones, faced dangerous adversaries, and held her ground under the most intense circumstances. But this was something different, something raw, something personal. In that moment, Aisha Monroe knew that the war she had been preparing for wasn't one of guns and strategy. It was one of survival, and she would not let Officer Callahan or anyone strip her of the strength she had fought so hard to build. But as she braced herself for whatever would come next, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Aisha's hand remained steady on the wheel, her knuckles white with tension, as Callahan snatched her documents and disappeared into his cruiser. She breathed slowly, deliberately, but the nerves gnawing at her insides refused to let up. She had done nothing wrong. There was no speeding violation, no reason to escalate this further. But something in Callahan's demeanor told her that he wasn't looking for justice. He was looking for an excuse. Minutes dragged by as Aisha watched his every movement in the side mirror. Her mind raced, replaying every encounter she had ever had with law enforcement. Those moments where she had been treated as less than, where her rank and achievements were reduced to nothing because of the color of her skin. This was no different, only now she could feel the weight of it pressing against her in a way she hadn't fully expected. Callahan returned, his posture stiff, but his face a mask of contempt. He didn't even bother to look at her as he approached again. His boots crunched on the gravel, each step measured, heavy with intent. The air between them crackled with a dangerous energy, thick with the unspoken threat of what was about to come. "Step out of the vehicle," he commanded. His voice low but laced with authority. Aisha's eyes narrowed, a flash of disbelief passing through her. "I've done nothing wrong," she said, her voice controlled, but there was an edge to it now. "Why are you pulling me out of my vehicle?" He ignored her words, his hand moving to his belt to unclip his handcuffs. "Out, now," he repeated, his voice rising. There was a dangerous edge to it now, a warning. She could feel her heart race. Every instinct she had screamed at her to comply, to avoid confrontation, to make it out of this unscathed. But she couldn't let him just drag her out. Not when she had done nothing wrong. Not when she had earned her position, her rank, her life in uniform. Aisha hesitated for a moment before slowly opening the door. The heat of the Nevada sun hit her face, but it was nothing compared to the tension building in the pit of her stomach. She stepped out, keeping her movements deliberate, showing no sign of aggression. But Callahan was already on edge, and the second she was fully out of the car, he moved toward her, his hand gripping her arm tightly. "You think you're above the law, huh?" His voice was a harsh whisper, a growl in her ear as he twisted her arm behind her back, pain shooting up her shoulder. "Officer, you're hurting me," Aisha said calmly, her voice steady despite the sharp pain. "You have no right to do this. I'm an officer in the U.S. Army." Callahan didn't respond. He only tightened his grip, yanking her roughly. Her mind was spinning, adrenaline flooding her system as she fought to stay calm. She had faced physical confrontations before, but this was different. This wasn't just about defending herself. It was about proving that her life mattered, that she mattered. "I'm not resisting," she said, her voice stronger now, carrying a note of authority. "This is unnecessary. I'm doing nothing wrong." Callahan's lips curled into a sneer as he shoved her against the side of the SUV. His breath was hot against her neck as he leaned in, his voice thick with hatred. "You're just another person I get to put in line," he spat, his words soaked with venom. Aisha felt a surge of rage bubble up, but she swallowed it, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. She wasn't going to let him control her, not now, not ever. But her body was aching, every movement twisting in pain from the way he held her arm, the way he used his weight to press her into the vehicle. "Officer," she said again, her voice low and measured. "You're making a mistake." His response was a growl, his hand jerking her arm higher, forcing her to wince in pain. She could feel his power over her, but she refused to let it break her spirit. "You're not in charge here," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "I am, and I'm gonna make sure you remember that." Her mind raced as she fought to keep her cool. The military training, the countless hours of discipline, kicked in. She had to survive this. She had to stay focused. But as Callahan's grip tightened, she could feel the shift in the air. This wasn't about law anymore. This was about power, about domination. And Aisha Monroe wasn't going to let him win. Aisha's pulse hammered in her ears as she stood by her SUV, her arms still throbbing from Callahan's rough grip. Every muscle in her body screamed for relief, but her mind was razor-sharp, calculating, seeking a way out. The heat of the Nevada sun was nothing compared to the tension surrounding her. It was as if the air itself was thick with danger. Callahan walked back to his cruiser, his boots crunching against the gravel as he disappeared behind the vehicle. His partner, a hulking man with a cold, disinterested stare, remained by the side of the road, watching Aisha as if she were a prisoner, already shackled by invisible chains. But Aisha wasn't just going to stand there and wait for this nightmare to unfold. No, she had fought too hard to let herself be broken now. Her gaze flicked to the phone resting on the dashboard of her SUV, her lifeline in this moment. Callahan had taken her documents, but he hadn't taken away her resolve. She had one chance, one move that could turn the tide. Her fingers moved almost instinctively, reaching for the phone and dialing the number she knew by heart. The Pentagon. The seconds stretched into an eternity as the phone rang, the sound of it echoing louder in her ears than the hum of the desert. Her heart was in her throat, but she forced herself to breathe, to remain calm. She had done nothing wrong. She had every right to be here to stand her ground. She wasn't just a civilian. She was a soldier, a leader, and she would not let a small-town cop strip her of that dignity. Finally, the phone clicked, and a familiar voice answered, calm and authoritative. Pentagon, Lieutenant Colonel Monroe speaking. Aisha didn't hesitate. Her words came out clipped but steady, her military training kicking in. Officer Brett Callahan has pulled me over on Highway 95. He's harassing me, making racist remarks, and I need immediate assistance. I'm being treated unfairly. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, a rustling of papers, and then the voice responded with the familiar cadence of protocol. We've received your location, Colonel. Hold tight. Help is on the way. Aisha felt the briefest flicker of hope. The weight of Callahan's hostility and the heat of the desert seemed to lift, if only for a moment. She wasn't alone. She wasn't powerless. But before she could take another breath, Callahan's angry voice broke through the calm, sending a chill down her spine. What the hell do you think you're doing? Callahan's voice was a harsh bark, echoing across the silence of the highway. His words were laced with suspicion, his eyes narrowing as he strode back toward her. The paper in his hand crumpled like a threat. You think a phone call's gonna get you out of this? Think again. Aisha's heart skipped a beat, but she stood her ground, the phone still pressed to her ear. She could hear the anger in his voice, the way he tried to hide his fear with aggression. The call had unsettled him. She could see it in his eyes, the flicker of doubt that crossed his face when he saw her speaking into the phone. But it wasn't enough to stop him. Is that who you were talking to? Huh? Callahan sneered, stalking closer, his face twisted with disdain. The Pentagon? You think they're gonna save you? You're just another nobody out here. Colonel, just another target. Aisha's grip tightened on the phone, her fingers starting to sweat. She could feel the rage simmering beneath her calm exterior, threatening to bubble over, but she refused to let it show. She couldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. I'm not your enemy, officer, she said, her voice firm, despite the sharp bite in her chest. I'm a U.S. Army colonel, and I have the right to be treated with respect. Callahan's lips twisted into a mocking grin. Respect? You want respect? His voice was dripping with venom as he stepped even closer, practically spitting in her face. Out here, I'm the one who makes the rules, and right now you're wasting my time. Get back in your car. The tension was suffocating now, hanging thick between them like a dark cloud. Aisha could see the fire in Callahan's eyes, the hunger to control, to dominate. His partner stood by, arms crossed, silently waiting for his cue to step in if things went any further. The fear in Aisha's chest was growing, but she refused to let it take hold. She could feel the presence of the Pentagon in her ear, the thin thread of support she had, fragile but powerful. I'm not going anywhere, officer, Aisha said, her voice unwavering. You have no right to treat me like this. Callahan's gaze flicked toward the phone again, the flicker of doubt returning to his face. But it was brief. He wasn't about to back down. You don't get to talk to me like that, he growled, stepping forward. Now get in the car or I'll make you. Aisha's stomach twisted with fear, but she stood firm. She could hear the hum of the phone in her ear, the quiet reassurance that help was on its way. But she knew that until it arrived. She was on her OW as Callahan's hand shot out toward her. She braced herself, not knowing what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. The battle for her dignity, her rights, was just beginning. Aisha's heart pounded in her chest as she held the phone, listening to the calm, reassuring voice of the Pentagon official on the other end. But before she could process the words, her attention was violently ripped away by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching her. Callahan's figure loomed, his face a twisted mask of rage and contempt. "You think you can call for backup?" Callahan spat, his voice low and threatening, as he took another step toward her. "You think someone's gonna come and save you, huh? You're just a little girl playing dress-up. I make the rules here, not you." Aisha barely had time to react before he lunged at her, his hands grabbing her roughly by the arm. His grip was like iron, digging into her skin as he yanked her forward, her feet scraping against the gravel. She tried to break free, but his fingers tightened, pulling her into a brutal, unrelenting hold. Her breath hitched, a wave of panic crashing over her as his partner, a silent figure until now, joined in. Together, they shoved her to the ground, her body hitting the rough, hot asphalt with a sickening thud. The wind was knocked from her lungs, and for a moment, she could do nothing but gasp for air, pain radiating through her back where the ground had met her spine. Callahan loomed over her, his face contorted with hatred as he stood, towering above her like an executioner. He sneered down at her, his words dripping with venom. "You're nothing but a token, Monroe," he snarled, spitting on the ground beside her. "Just a tool they dress up in a uniform to make it look like they care. But out here, you're just another black woman in my way." Aisha's breath was still ragged, but she held her ground, refusing to show weakness. His insults were meant to degrade her, to tear her apart. He was trying to break her, but Aisha Monroe wasn't that easily crushed. She pushed herself up from the ground, pain lancing through her limbs, but determination setting in. The heat of the desert sun burned her skin, but it couldn't compare to the fury boiling inside her. She wasn't going to let him win. She wouldn't let him strip her of everything she had worked for. "Is this how you prove you're in control, Callahan?" Aisha's voice was raw, but steady. "By attacking someone who's done nothing wrong? You'll have to do better than that." But Callahan wasn't listening. Instead, he backhanded her, the force of the blow sending her reeling, her cheeks stinging as it collided with the hard ground. Her vision blurred momentarily, the world spinning in a haze of red and white. But even as the blood began to pool in her mouth, she pushed it down. She refused to let him see her flinch. "Shut up!" Callahan barked. His partner, who had remained silent up until now, stepped forward, his face unreadable. But there was something in his stance, something cold and predatory in the way he watched Aisha, that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She struggled to regain her footing, her knees scraping against the rough ground. Her pulse thrummed in her ears, but her training took over. She was a soldier. She had survived worse than this, but her body was betraying her. The pain was becoming too much to ignore. Still, she pushed through it, forcing herself to stand tall, despite the world spinning around her. Callahan stepped closer, his hand reaching for her, but this time, Aisha was ready. With a quick, sharp movement, she slapped his hand away, sending a flash of fury into his eyes. The momentary defiance ignited something in him. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" he sneered, grabbing her by the collar of her uniform and jerking her forward. "I'll make you regret that. You're nothing." His partner moved in, now joining in the physical assault. Together, they began to drag her further away from the vehicle, treating her like a rag doll. Aisha's mind raced, calculating, looking for an opening. But every inch of her body screamed with exhaustion, with pain, with the overwhelming fear that she was going to lose this fight. But still, she fought. She fought to hold on to the sliver of hope that had kept her going all these years. She fought because she knew if she didn't, they would take everything from her. "I am not afraid of you," Aisha gritted through her teeth, her eyes flashing with resolve. "And you will not break me." But Callahan's laugh was cruel and unhinged, his hands tightening around her once more. His words were the final blow, the cruelest of them all. "You're going to wish you never stood up to me, Monroe," he growled, dragging her down with a force that made her stomach churn. "I'll make sure of that." As his words echoed in the hot, dry air, Aisha's mind shifted into overdrive. She wasn't just fighting for her survival now. She was fighting for her dignity, her humanity, and for every person who had ever been reduced to nothing by men like him. And she would not back down. Not now. Not ever. Aisha's vision swam as she struggled to keep her balance, the gravel beneath her feet shifting, her body a canvas of pain from the brutal blows. Her uniform was dirted, torn, but still she stood tall. The anger inside her had become a fire, burning brighter with every step she took, every taunt, every insult hurled in her direction. But the moment Callahan returned, that fire flared higher. He had tasted power over her once, and now he was back for more. His partner had finally stepped aside, watching silently from a distance, perhaps sensing that the officer's temper was nearing its boiling point. Callahan's face twisted with fury as he made his way back to her. A twisted grin plastered on his face. The air around them felt thick, charged, like the calm before a storm. "You think you can stand up to me?" Callahan snarled, his eyes wild with rage. "You've got a lot of guts, Colonel, but I'm not done with you yet." Before Aisha could react, Callahan moved faster than she expected, his hand reaching for her shoulder, spinning her around with brutal force. The movement threw her off balance, and her back slammed into the side of her SUV, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. She gasped for air, trying to steady herself, but the world around her was spinning. She couldn't afford to lose focus now, not when it felt like everything she had worked for was slipping through her fingers. "You're coming with me?" Callahan growled, grabbing her by the arm and yanking her toward the cruiser. His grip was suffocating, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her struggle. Aisha's mind raced. She had fought wars before, been in situations where her life was at risk. But this was something else. Callahan wasn't just attacking her physically. He was trying to break her spirit, trying to force her into submission, to remind her that in his eyes, she would always be less than. But Aisha Monroe wasn't about to let that happen. With a fierce surge of energy, she twisted in his grip, using the momentum to break free. She could feel the heat rise in her chest, the adrenaline pumping through her veins. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to fight, whatever it took to survive. But as she moved, she heard it, the unmistakable sound of a car engine revving. Her heart skipped a beat, and her instincts told her to move. Fast, she bolted toward her SUV, her legs burning with the effort, but Callahan wasn't far behind. His voice, cold and taunting, sliced through the air. "You're not going anywhere, Colonel," he sneered. "You can't outrun me." The chase had begun. Aisha's fingers fumbled with the door handle, but just as she was about to get inside, Callahan's hand grabbed her by the wrist, wrenching her back. Her body slammed into the side of the SUV again, pain shooting through her ribs, but she didn't let it stop her. She twisted, kicking out with all her strength, aiming for his shins. It was enough to make him stagger back, but he wasn't finished. "Get in the car now," Callahan screamed, his voice drenched with frustration. But Aisha wasn't going to let him win. She wasn't going to let him treat her like a criminal when all she had done was defend herself. Her mind raced. She needed to outsmart him to find an escape. The weight of the situation was crushing, the realization dawning on her that this might be her last chance to fight back. She reached into the driver's side door, pulling out a small, folded metal object she kept for emergencies. A flashlight. A simple thing, but in this moment it became her weapon. As Callahan lunged at her again, she swung it at his chest with all the strength she had left. The blow landed, and Callahan reeled back, a grunt escaping his lips as he stumbled. This was her opening. Without thinking, Aisha turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest, adrenaline fueling every step. She wasn't thinking about where she was going, only that she needed to get away. Behind her, Callahan cursed, and his partner was already in the cruiser, chasing after her. The roar of the engine filled her ears, and she pushed herself harder, willing her body to go faster. Every part of her screamed for mercy, but Aisha wasn't going to give in. She refused. She would fight, she would survive, no matter how relentless the pursuit. The door was her next obstacle. She knew it was locked, but she wasn't about to let that stop her. Using the small piece of metal she had pried free, she jammed it into the lock, working with careful precision. Sweat trickled down her forehead as the minutes ticked by, each one heavier than the last. Her heart was racing now, pounding in her ears, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Not when the thought of being trapped here forever felt more suffocating than any physical restraint. And then, with a soft click, the lock gave way to Aisha's breath caught in her throat as she slowly opened the door, the quiet squeak of the hinge sending a wave of panic rushing through her. She froze, waiting for any sign that someone had heard her. But the hallway beyond was empty, the guards nowhere in sight. This was her moment. She slipped into the darkness, moving with the stealth and precision that had been drilled into her throughout her military career. Every step was calculated, each movement quiet, fluid. She passed the first guard post, then the second, her heart pounding in her chest. Every second felt like a ticking time bomb, but she didn't stop. She couldn't afford to. But as she neared the exit, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway behind her. Aisha froze, every muscle in her body locking up as panic surged. They had found her. She was running out of time. In that instant, something inside her snapped. There was no turning back now. She ran. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the empty hallways, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't be caught again. She had to escape. For herself, for her family, for everything she had worked for. Her body screamed in protest, but Aisha pushed herself harder, her legs burning with every stride. She could hear the guards behind her now, their shouts growing louder, the chase closing in. But she didn't stop. She wouldn't. She would fight until the end. The night air hit her like a slap as she burst through the door, her body flying into the open. The cold wind bit at her skin, but it didn't matter. She was free, at least for now. Aisha kept running, her legs aching, her breath ragged. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. The weight of the lies, the injustice, the betrayal pressed down on her, but she refused to give in. She would make it out of this, no matter what it took. Her chest heaved as she ran through the darkened streets, her thoughts a blur of fear and determination. She didn't know where she was going, didn't know what the future held, but she couldn't stop now. She had come too far, and as the sounds of pursuit faded behind her, Aisha allowed herself a single, fleeting moment of hope. She had escaped. She had survived. But she knew this was only the beginning. The fight wasn't over, and she would keep running, keep fighting until she had her justice. Until she could prove that the truth mattered. As Aisha ran through the cold, desert night, her mind was a swirl of emotions. Relief, anger, exhaustion, but above all, a fierce resolve. She had escaped. The physical chains were gone, and the immediate threat of Callahan and his partner had faded into the night. But as much as she longed for peace, she knew this was far from over. Her body ached, her thoughts raced, but deep down, she understood that the battle she had started wasn't just for her. It was for every person who had ever been judged unfairly, for every individual who had been crushed beneath the weight of injustice. Aisha's escape had given her a glimmer of freedom, but it had also opened her eyes to the unyielding truth. This fight for justice was an unbroken chain, one that would continue until the very system that had failed her was dismantled. She had come face to face with the ugliness of racism, the blatant discrimination that twisted her every action, the lies that painted her as the villain when she was the victim. But as Aisha sat in the shadows of the desert, catching her breath, she knew something else. The truth was stronger than any false narrative. The injustice she had witnessed didn't stop with Callahan. He was merely a piece of a much larger system, one that allowed prejudice to fester unchecked. The corrupt officers, the manipulation of evidence, the lies they had spread to discredit her, none of it was an accident. It was a system that perpetuated itself, and for Aisha, that was the real enemy. But even in the face of overwhelming odds, she had fought. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. She had called for help when the odds were stacked against her, when the truth seemed impossible to grasp. She had stood tall when Callahan tried to tear her down. And most importantly, she had refused to back down, to let her dignity be stripped away by hate and fear. As Aisha wiped the sweat from her brow, feeling the gritty sting of the desert sand on her face, she realized the profound power of standing up for what's right. Her escape wasn't just about freedom, it was about resilience, about the power of not letting oppression silence your voice. Her courage to fight back, to escape, was a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure, to rise, and to defy. But she also knew this. The fight wasn't over. Her journey was only just beginning. Aisha's story is a powerful reminder that injustice doesn't end with a single battle won. We all carry the responsibility to keep pushing forward, to seek truth and accountability, no matter how long the road may seem. Whether it's standing up against the systemic racism that plagued Aisha's life or addressing the subtle biases that permeate our everyday interactions, the fight for justice is ongoing. As she moved deeper into the night, her mind was clear. She had to keep going. She had to make sure that the lies about her were exposed for what they were. But her mission wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about forcing the world to confront the ugly truths it had long tried to ignore. And this brings us to a powerful lesson. Change doesn't come from silence. It doesn't come from standing by and accepting the way things are. Real change happens when we speak up, when we raise our voices, even when it feels like the world is pushing us down. It's about facing the uncomfortable truths and doing something about them. Aisha's strength, her refusal to be defeated, is the kind of courage that can inspire us all. It reminds us that justice, though elusive at times, is something worth fighting for. But here's the reality. Aisha's fight isn't just her own. It's a collective effort. Whether it's standing against racial discrimination, standing up for the oppressed, or simply helping someone who's struggling, each one of us has the power to be a part of the solution. Aisha is a living testament to that power. Her actions, her persistence, her resilience. They show us that no matter how insurmountable the odds may seem, we can make a difference. So, as we wrap up Aisha's journey for now, remember, her story is not just an individual triumph. It's a call to action for us all. It's a reminder that injustice will never cease until we stand together and demand better. We all have a responsibility to make sure the voices of those silenced by oppression are heard. We all have a duty to make the world a better, more just place for everyone. If Aisha's story has moved you, inspired you, or even challenged you, don't just walk away. Share it. Spread the word. Let's make sure her fight continues to inspire others to stand up for what's right. If you believe in justice, in equality, in the power of one person to make a difference, then hit that subscribe button. Stay engaged. Keep fighting, keep learning, and together, let's ensure that stories like Aisha's do not fade into silence. Justice is not just a concept, it's a movement. Let's be a part of it. Together. The road stretched ahead, but the headlights of the cruiser were closing in fast. The sound of tires screeching louder as Callahan's fury continued to chase her down. Aisha's breath came in ragged gasps, her legs burning with every stride, but she pushed forward. She couldn't stop now. The darkness of the desert loomed ahead, and just as the cruiser was closing in on her, Aisha took a sharp turn off the road, weaving between the rocky terrain, trying to lose them. But the headlights were still there, relentless in their pursuit. And just when she thought she had outrun them, a voice cut through the air. "You're not going anywhere, Monroe," Callahan shouted, his partner's voice joining in, both of them determined to bring her down. The chase wasn't over. It was only getting worse. Aisha's body felt numb as the cold, steel cuffs bit into her wrists. Her breath came in shallow, quick gasps, each inhale seeming more difficult than the last. She had fought with everything she had, but it hadn't been enough. Now, as the doors of the cruiser slammed shut behind her, The finality of her situation sank in. She was being arrested, not for any crime she had committed, but for standing her ground, for refusing to let a racist cop break her. The drive to the local jail was agonizingly slow, the sound of the tires crunching over the desert pavement a constant reminder that she was no longer in control. Aisha's mind raced, replaying every moment of the encounter with Callahan and his partner. The physical violence, the insults, the degrading remarks. She had tried to fight back, tried to call for help, but now it was all too late as they pulled into the jail. Aisha's thoughts twisted into a knot. She had been falsely accused of assault, of resisting arrest. But she knew the truth that no one cared to hear. She had been attacked. Her rights had been violated. And now she was paying the price for it. They shoved her out of the car, hands still bound by the cuffs, and forced her into the cold, sterile holding cell. Her legs wobbled beneath her, exhaustion threatening to overtake her, but she kept herself upright. She wasn't going to let them see her break. The cell was small, barely enough room for her to move, but it felt like an eternity as the minutes stretched into hours. Her uniform was torn, stained with dirt and blood, but her sense of dignity remained intact, even as the reality of the situation began to sink in. She was alone. The world outside her cell had moved on, but here, in this suffocating room, she was trapped by the lies, the twisted narrative that had been crafted to discredit her. Aisha didn't know how long she had been in the cell when they finally brought her out. They marched her through the narrow hallways, the click of the guards' boots echoing off the walls, their eyes cold and indifferent. She was nothing to them, just another black woman in a uniform, her rank meaningless in the face of their prejudice. They took her to the interrogation room, a sterile space with harsh fluorescent lights overhead. The table was cold, the chair uncomfortably hard, but Aisha didn't care. She had endured worse. But what was coming next was something she wasn't prepared for. They wanted her to confess to a crime she hadn't committed. "Sit down," a voice barked, and she obeyed without hesitation. A man in a crisp suit sat across from her, his face hard, his demeanor calculating. "You're being charged with assaulting a peace officer, resisting arrest, and theft of county property. These are serious charges, Colonel. You're facing a long time behind bars." Aisha's jaw clenched. Her heart pounded in her chest as the weight of the words hit her like a blow. Assault? Resisting arrest? Theft? None of it was true. She had been the one attacked. She had been the one who had been humiliated, stripped of her dignity. And yet, here she was, being accused of crimes she had never committed. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" the man asked, his voice cold, detached. Aisha opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The truth seemed so far out of reach, twisted and distorted by the lies they had already started spreading. Her mind raced, trying to find the words to explain, to fight back. But every time she opened her mouth, it felt like the walls of the room were closing in on her. Instead of speaking, she remained silent, her eyes fixed on the man across from her. The silence stretched between them like a thick rope, suffocating in its intensity, and then, just when she thought she might break, the door to the room opened, and another officer stepped inside, this one wearing a different uniform, a higher rank. The first officer stood up and saluted, but the newcomer didn't acknowledge him. He turned to Aisha, his expression unreadable. "She's been falsely accused, hasn't she?" the newcomer said, his voice low but carrying a weight that seemed to hang in the air. Aisha blinked, trying to understand what was happening. Her heart skipped a beat. Was this a rescue? Or was this just another twist in the game they were playing with her life? But before she could respond, the man in the suit snapped, "This is none of your business. She's guilty of what she's been accused of." The newcomer looked at him with cold eyes before turning his attention back to Aisha. "Don't worry, Colonel. This isn't over yet," he said. His voice soft but firm. Aisha's chest tightened. The words like a lifeline thrown to her in the storm. But how long would it take for the truth to come to light? How long would she be trapped in this web of lies? Her mind raced with the uncertainty, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let them win. She wasn't going to let them break her. The fight had only just begun. Aisha sat in the dimly lit holding cell, the cold concrete walls closing in around her. The faint buzzing of the overhead light was the only sound that filled the space. And yet, in her mind, the noise was deafening. Every breath felt labored, every heartbeat loud and chaotic. She had been locked away in this small, suffocating room for hours, but her mind refused to stop racing. She couldn't let them win. She couldn't let them strip her of everything she had fought for. Her family, her rank, her dignity. They all depended on her. Aisha's body ached, her muscles sore from the rough treatment, but it was the weight of the situation that truly drained her. She was alone, betrayed by the system she had once sworn to protect. But even as despair threatened to swallow her, a flicker of defiance stirred deep inside her chest. She was not broken. Not yet. Her thoughts turned to the words of the officer who had spoken earlier, those accusing words, the lies that had been fed to the world. Assault, resisting arrest, theft, none of it was true. She had never been the aggressor. She had never deserved any of this. And in that moment, as the silence around her became unbearable, a single thought pierced through the chaos: that I have to get out of here. Her pulse quickened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, her focus narrowed. She couldn't sit here, waiting for the inevitable. She had to fight, to survive, to escape. Her mind began to race as she assessed her surroundings. The door to her cell was locked, of course, but the guard outside had walked away for a moment. Aisha knew this was her chance. She had learned to adapt in the most impossible of situations, had faced death in the eyes countless times on the battlefield, and now the same survival instincts were kicking in. With trembling hands, she reached for the metal bed frame. It wasn't much, but she had learned to use whatever she could find to her advantage. The small, rusted bolt under the bed was loose enough for her to pry it out. She worked quietly, each movement calculated, her breath shallow as she made sure not to make a sound. Every second felt like a lifetime, every creak of the metal sending a jolt of panic through her chest. But she couldn't stop now. She couldn't wait any longer.